These parents are giving up so much of their time to come and coach the children. If we try to create too much work, too many online modules to go and watch, too many pieces of paper they have to fill out, that they might walk away. And that's the balance that we strike. And how do we find the happy medium?
Well, clearly every parent's going to be committed to their kid and watching their kid. I think looking back on lessons learned, I'll use this as an example, and this isn't about me as much as it was the individual. In the American League, in baseball, you have a thing called the Gold Glove, right? That's the best defender at your position. So I won 3 of those. Before I won my first one, the guy named Frank White with the Kansas City Royals had won 8 in a row. I'll never forget playing a game in Kansas City, infield in, bottom of the 9th, ground ball to me. I threw it away. We lost the game. After the game, Frank White calls me in my clubhouse and meets me as I'm leaving the stadium and says, "You got to take your time on that. You're on the AstroTurf, ball's going to get to you faster. You got plenty of time. You rush that." I won the Gold Glove. I took his Gold Glove from a lesson that he taught me. And I think we don't see that in the coaching fraternity anymore. You don't have a parent going, "You know what, I'm going to help you out here," or a coach saying something. That happened all the time in the generation I grew up in. A coach passing a lesson on, because we're so consumed with thinking we're going to end up being the coach of the Packers. You're not going to be. It ain't happening, you know? So let's look at concentrating on helping a community of kids as opposed to thinking you're going to play. My wife plays in this competitive tennis all the time, and I tell her all the time, "You're not going to Wimbledon. It's okay. You're not going. You know, enjoy it, have some fun." But I think we've lost perspective in this country.
How has that happened, Harold?
Money.
Yeah.
We sit there and think that's the next Jeter.
Yeah.
That's the next A-Rod. You know, as opposed to when I was coming up, I played every sport, whatever the season was, I played it. I didn't know I was going to be a Major League Baseball player. I just played, and as I got older, those things worked itself out. But I think we've sat here and we say at 7 years old, that's the next LeBron sitting right there in front of us. He's 9. We don't know what's going to happen with Nico. I want to develop the young man, and people should be involved, engaged in developing our communities. And I think that's what we've lost, and that to me is the essence of what coaching is about, and we've lost that in coaching and in parenting quite a bit, in my mind.
I'm Rebecca. And another thing, I hire the volunteers that we talk about. I run 2 community centers in Prince George's County. And most of the time, the parents end up coaching because we can't find volunteer coaches. And by the time we run background checks on each one, by the time all of the training, even though they may miss the training, that don't stop them from coaching, but they miss the training, it becomes a task for them. And it's very disheartening to where we have to cancel a whole session of basketball because no one wants to volunteer.
That's a huge issue. And Steve,
Absolutely.
you and I were having that conversation actually in the green room before. How do we balance this? How do we find the happy medium? As I was saying to Harold, with there are so many pieces of red tape that have to be gone through for a coach to be qualified and safe to be with our children, but they're not getting a wage, they're not getting a salary every year, so it's a lot to expect from somebody. So how do you see that predicament?
Yeah, it is a predicament. I don't have the magic solution to it. I think the standard is so inconsistent now. I think the key is consistency. So that's, I think, what we should be focusing on, kind of a standardized consistency of education that all sports get behind, so that there's a minimum there's a minimum proficiency. And right now we don't have that. And there's, in fact, we have just the opposite. So I think we start there. I mean, we're all, one of the things we're concerned about is not only the health and safety of our children, but also the liability that comes with that, and the additional, sometimes onerous requirements that we face. Concussion education is a big one. Incredibly important safety concern for particularly contact sports, really all sports. But that's an additional layer of education that we've created this expectation on all coaches to be able to absorb and learn. And and it's not just because we want to make sure our players are safe, it's because we fear liability ramifications of that. So I would say start with standardizing our expectations and standardizing what we ask of coaches and getting kind of unity among sport in that regard.
If any of you have any questions, just one second, Harold. If you just use the app that you guys have been using all day, the slido.com, submit your questions. Andre's going to pick out the best, and we'll answer them in due course. Your point.
Well, I was just going to interject this. We talked about it on a phone call about a week or so ago. But looking back at my childhood and growing up, I remember when I was 10, 11 years old, you look up to those high schools, those seniors in high school or the juniors, that high school becomes your heroes. It's not the NFL, it's not the college, it's the high school level. And I remember those high school players were my youth coaches. They utilized our local high school as coaches for the kids that were coming up in those grassroots programs. And I was so fortunate I had great people to do that, but I think we've lost that connection, again, community, because we're taking kids and saying, go travel across the country. It's more important for you to go play in Las Vegas than it is to stay home in your local area. But I think if we engage our local communities, our high schools, and get back to the girls and boys that are in those high schools of, hey, why don't you come out and coach those kids in the morning on Saturday? I think we've lost that. We don't even ask. And I think if you asked, they'd say, yeah, sure, I think I'd like to do that. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting accountability because of their high schools. You're knowing who these kids are because of their parents and the community. And you're also getting a development of them being able to continue on to be. We're developing coaches at an early age. So I think we've lost that. And that would be something that I would encourage in your communities, man. Find out what high school players, and you don't have to be the best player on the team or the 25th person on the team. If you're engaged, they're going to know their sport. They're going to know what they're doing. We're eliminating a lot of the problems we're discussing because we haven't reached out to those local high school kids who have an interest. And I think it would be huge if we did that.
That's a great point. Alan, you're nodding at the end. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just love it. I think it's
me too.
really, really great idea.
I think I'm gonna look into that.
How would you feel if some of the high school kids were coaching Nico? Would you be encouraged by that? Would you be happy with that?
Well, rec-wise, yes. Rec-wise, yes. But that is something that I could take back to my community centers and have a conversation about and see about, tapping into the population that we have.
Yeah, I think we've focused so much on specialization, on the half of 1% who's going to end up being at an elite level, instead of the other 99% who we really want to be active, going to be playing, and be in the proper situation. Nico's going to have, you said recreationally, and every kid's recreationally, because Nico's going to get a special coach that's going to teach him how to shoot a jumper and all those things that he's going to need as he continues to develop. I'm talking about the masses. If I was coming up now, I'd probably get a hitting coach at the time I'm in high school that says, hey, you got a chance to be a Major League Baseball player. But we're talking about the 99%. And that's why I think we've got to get back to using those kids in high schools and stuff.
How would that work in lacrosse, do you think, Steve?
It'd be great. We had that conversation. We also talked about college players. Is there an opportunity to look?
Yeah.
It's all about accessibility. Is what we're talking about today and tomorrow. Accessibility of sport. More kids having opportunities to play. And part of the challenge is, dollars are not flowing to youth sports or school-based sports in our country today. They're flowing away from them. So could we look at also timing? Could we look at college athletes coming back for the summer, create kind of urban programs or rural programs that feed off those college athletes, create internships or maybe some educational curricula within their college studies that could give them credit. So I think there's a lot to that, and we're going to pursue it from a lacrosse perspective at the college level. We think there's some interesting potential there.
Fantastic. Project Play 2020, Alan, which was announced earlier on today, is looking to improve the quality, increase the quantity of coaches between now and 2020. How successful do you think that can be? How realistic?
I think it's realistic, especially if we get a kind of this common platform, a common idea of what we want to do as a nation a little bit. We are so fractured in coaching right now. I mean, there are so many different philosophies and ideas about what coaching should look like. And if we as a result of Project Play, can start to come up with some common underlying ideas about quality coaching, and then use those to develop tools that can be then provided. So if it's a high school kid, it's a college kid, it's a volunteer, you're not just being stuck out there and basically said, oh yeah, go coach, and then you're like, what do I do? Instead, you've got really good resources that ultimately you can, like, I can learn to do this, I can do it well. And change the dialogue a little bit from being one of like, no, I'm staying away from that, to one like, this sounds like fun, and I have tools made available to me, and I'm going to do a good job. I want to do a good job, because, 90% of the people, 95% of the people I ever run across, they don't want to do a bad job. They want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And if they've got tools, they're going to be like, I'll tap right into that and figure out how to really have fun with this and do a really great quality job of coaching. And then you have retention, then you have excitement and really satisfaction with sport, and you create lifelong participants in sport. And I think there's an opportunity here to do that maybe hasn't existed in the same way that it does now.
With Project Play 2020, of course, we're looking at across the board all communities, but in minority communities, Harold, how do we specifically target those areas which need it the most?
Well, I think the same thing, particularly that we've been discussing here with college, high school, utilizing that. The resources are obviously scarce, and I think because we've fallen into this trap in this country of thinking specialization is the key, and being able to pay somebody to train you, we are so missing it. I come from a community in Corvallis, Oregon, where I had 10 Division I football players on my high school football team. The head coach at Nebraska was my brother's high school quarterback. My brother played in the big leagues. Another guy was the #1 pick in the major leagues. We never had any of all that. We just played. I kept their stats of wiffle ball on the weekends. I think we've so lost in this country thinking that specialization and paying to play is so ridiculous. Go out and play. If it's there, it's there. I can't hardly work my computer. My 5-year-old, 6-year-old does better than I do. You either have that or you don't. We're investing in kids saying you're going to be the next whatever, and we're throwing $100,000 into the kid. Put it into what they're interested in and what you see their talent being. I think we've so lost it, and it's so frustrating to see, because the more you play and the more you develop, you can walk out right now. I can go to a high school baseball team and I can say, that kid's going to play college, that one's not. Why are we paying $100,000 for this kid to play travel ball? We're wasting time and money and effort when you just want him to go out and have a great time. And I'm telling you, we miss it. And that's what we got to get back to in this country, because we've lost our minds with all the money we're paying on specialization. We just have.
Michelle, when you look at Nico and you pay what you have to pay and you see the future in front of him, what concerns you the most?
Well, I totally understand what he's saying. It's so sad. I don't want to have to pay for my son to play, but that's just the reality of where we are. It don't matter where you are. Youth sports are a pay-to-play situation at the moment. It's a big business, like I stated earlier, and that's just what's happening. If I don't, guess what he does? Nothing. So he has to do something. And at this moment, he plays football and basketball. That's just what he likes to do. And so it becomes a bigger issue, because how do we make sure that all kids are active?
Well, we have to get back to your question. It's not just an inner city problem. I think it's a national problem.
It is.
We have to make it affordable.
Yeah, that's the start.
And that's the whole thing, is we got to get back to making sports.
Well, and part of that's educating parents, right? When you're the parent of your first child, you've never done that before. You've never parented a child at age 5, at age 6, at age 7. You've never been a part of the youth sports world before. So there's a natural ignorance that comes with being a parent. And I'm a parent of 2 kids who went through youth sports and played at the high school level. And I think parent education, somehow we've got to look at the opportunity. Maybe reaching out and engaging the high school and college players, as we've discussed up here, is a good kind of early intervention. If we can get college players or young adults before they have kids engaged in this dialogue who are of the sporting community.
And they're going to be better than the guy you're paying to specialize anyway.
That's right.
They're going to be a better coach. You're going to get more knowledge.
And if we can get them talking as a community about this, I mean, this may be a little far-fetched, but it won't be long until they'll have kids. And they're going to have some perspective on this. We're already thinking about in lacrosse, trying to do some research on, to the point about specialization and the privatization of youth sports, looking at, a group of recruited college players who have gone through their 4 years, played lacrosse. You're not going to make your living off lacrosse after college. That's one of the big differences in our sport, unlike baseball or football or basketball. But to ask them what their experience was coming up through this kind of privatized club tournament model, and as they reflect back on it, what are their thoughts? I think we're going to find some revealing perspective to share with the greater parents in our sport if we do that.
And I also think what happened was, and I remember, I started running track in elementary school. It was free. We had a DCIA. I grew up in DC. We had a DCIA conference, and we used to compete. And it wasn't just track and field, it was basketball. And all of it started, I was probably in the 2nd grade when I started. That is how I started running track. They took them out of the schools and made it to where you had to be like the 5th grade or 6th grade before you can start competitive sports. So that really gave us a void of those ages. And so they kind of got lost in that. And playing outside and being competitive and learning different sports, then they took physical education out of the schools at a point, and it made it less. I remember having physical education all the time, and so now I be like, how many times do y'all have physical education? Sometimes none. Sometimes it don't make their schedules, and so those are the things that needs to happen now to go into the future. They need to pick back up because the way that the obesity rate now, it shows that these schools aren't teaching physical sports anymore.
You're not nervous no more, are you?
We're going to have time for a quick Q&A in just a second. Just from a personal perspective, just very quickly, coming from the UK, I was staggered when I came here because you just play in England. You do just play. You don't. You might pay $1 or $2 a week, but you just play. Having said that, we're not very good at anything, so I'm not actually quite sure which one is better after all. Andre, question.
Yes. So our question is, why aren't there more female coaches, and how can we recruit more?
Question. Who'd like to take that one? Why are there not more female coaches?
Well, I can start. I think, we just haven't evolved societally yet to the point that we think we have. And, my wife has a more demanding job than I do, but even in our household, as much as I do, she does more. And so I think we need to really embrace this philosophy that we, as families, we need to encourage the moms and dads need to step in and fill that void, encourage the moms to get out there. In our sport, there's a real concern, and in many sports, a real concern that females are not interacting with young athletes anymore. Males are flooding to fill the void. And that's not anything against the males, but girls need female role models. And so from a familial standpoint, we need to kind of hopefully evolve to where our families and the husbands and wives can agree that both have an equitable responsibility to give back as youth coaches.
Well, I think the biggest thing is we haven't respected the female coach. And having 2 girls and a young boy, women are so detailed, they're better coaches. Yeah. And I've got to a point where my oldest was going to a softball camp, and then they were all, the female coach had gone to Seton Hall. She brought all her former teammates, and they ran this camp. It was so well ran, I sent my son. I'm like, he's going to them because they're so organized and they know what they're doing. So I think it's been a matter of respect more than anything else. And if we continue to say, well, the women only have to teach the women, they can't teach the guys, then we're going to continue to keep them in a box. So we have to open up our minds. I see the NBA starting to have some more female coaches. Football's starting to have that happening. Baseball has not got there. We're slowly getting there. But I think we got to start to open up our minds that an athlete's an athlete. And if you can coach, you can coach. And that's what we got to get to.
We could do a whole week on this entire topic, trust me. But gentlemen, ladies, we have to leave it there for now. Before we go, can I get the grade from each of you on the state of youth coaching today? Alan, I'll start with you. What grade would you give the state of youth coaching today, please?
We're CD.
Yeah.
We have a, we're
C/D?
D, yeah.
D,
I
okay,
think
gonna go with the D.
I feel like a personal responsibility that we're not doing enough to actually help coaches, become everything they can be. And so this, this notion is we got to do better.
Okay, Steve?
I would say C minus.
I agree, C minus.
I'd be somewhere C minus or D, somewhere in there. Depend on the sport.
Okay,
I think
Yeah.
we're failing in certain sports, and other sports we're really excelling in.
yeah. Long way to go, though, I think is the message for certain. Okay, well, ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.
you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much for being on our panel.
What an honor. Thank
We are
you.
going to be
Thank you all.
joined